Picture this. A woman in her early 30s walks through the doors of Riverside Valley High School, carrying a simple leather bag and wearing a warm smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The students passing by see someone who looks approachable, maybe even vulnerable. What they don't see is the steel resolve forged through years of hunting down criminals, the tactical awareness that scans every hallway for threats, and the psychological training that can break down the most hardened suspects. This is the story of how one counselor's hidden past turned a school's nightmare into a dream, and taught an entire community that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks the least threatening. The morning fog hung low over the hills surrounding Riverside Valley as Dr. Sarah Chen pulled her silver Honda into the faculty parking lot. At 32, she possessed an understated elegance that came from years of needing to blend into any environment. Her black hair was cut in a professional bob that framed a face that could appear kind and approachable, or coldly analytical depending on the situation. Today, she wore a soft gray cardigan over dark slacks, comfortable flats that would allow quick movement if necessary, and minimal jewelry that wouldn't catch or reflect light. To anyone watching, she looked like exactly what she was supposed to be: a school counselor ready to help troubled teenagers navigate their problems. Riverside Valley High School sat nestled in the affluent suburbs of Northern California, a sprawling campus of modern buildings and manicured lawns that served nearly 3,000 students from some of the wealthiest families in the region. The school boasted state-of-the-art facilities, championship sports teams, and a 97% college acceptance rate. But beneath the glossy exterior, a cancer had been growing for years, one that no amount of money or prestige could cure. Sarah had read the files during her first week, studying them with the same methodical approach she'd once used to profile serial killers. The previous counselor, Dr. Martinez, had lasted only 8 months before submitting his resignation. Before him, Mrs. Patterson had made it through one full academic year before requesting a transfer to the district office. The pattern was clear to anyone trained to see it: systematic psychological warfare, designed to drive out authority figures who might threaten the established order. The established order at Riverside Valley was ruled by a trio of seniors who had turned intimidation into an art form. Jake Morrison was their undisputed leader, the son of a tech billionaire who had donated millions to the school's new science wing. At 18, Jake possessed the kind of casual confidence that came from never facing real consequences for his actions. His sandy brown hair was always perfectly styled, his clothes expensive but deliberately casual, and his green eyes held the cold calculation of someone who viewed other people as objects to be manipulated. Beside him stood Marcus Webb, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in the county. Marcus was built like the linebacker he'd been before an injury ended his football career, using his imposing 6'3" frame to intimidate anyone who crossed their path. Unlike Jake's subtle cruelty, Marcus preferred direct confrontation, the kind of person who enjoyed watching others flinch. The third member of their unholy trinity was Tyler Kim, whose mother was a federal judge and whose father ran the largest law firm in 3 counties. Tyler was the strategist, the one who researched their targets' weaknesses and crafted psychological attacks that left no physical evidence but devastating emotional damage. He was quieter than his companions, preferring to observe and plan rather than engage directly, but his contributions to their campaigns of terror were arguably the most destructive. Together, they had created a culture of fear that extended far beyond their immediate victims. Teachers walked on eggshells around them, administrators made excuses for their behavior, and students lived in constant anxiety about becoming their next target. The previous counselors had tried various approaches. Some attempted to befriend the boys, Others tried to impose strict boundaries, and a few had simply tried to avoid them altogether. All had failed, driven away by a combination of harassment, manipulation, and the kind of psychological pressure that could break even experienced professionals. Sarah Chen understood pressure. She had spent 7 years with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, profiling some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. She had stared into the eyes of serial killers and terrorist masterminds, maintaining her composure while they tried every trick in their considerable arsenals to unnerve her. She had interrogated suspects who had murdered children, negotiated with hostage takers, and walked into crime scenes that would haunt most people's dreams for years. But none of that was on her official resume. According to the carefully crafted documents in her personnel file, Dr. Sarah Chen had earned her doctorate in psychology from Stanford, completed her internship at a private practice in San Francisco, and spent several years working with at-risk youth in various therapeutic settings. Her references were impeccable, her credentials impressive, and her interview had convinced the hiring committee that she was exactly what Riverside Valley needed. A fresh perspective from someone young enough to connect with students, but experienced enough to handle challenging cases. The truth was far more complex. Sarah had indeed earned her psychology doctorate, but through an accelerated program designed for federal agents. Her internship had been her training at Quantico, and her work with at-risk youth had involved profiling juvenile offenders who had committed crimes that defied comprehension. She had left the bureau 6 months earlier, officially citing a desire for a career change, but privately struggling with the toll that years of studying human darkness had taken on her psyche. Her former supervisor, Unit Chief Patricia Reeves, had recommended the career transition after noticing signs of burnout that Sarah herself hadn't recognized. The hypervigilance that served her well in the field had begun manifesting in her personal life, making it difficult to form relationships or find peace in civilian settings. Reeves had suggested that using her skills to help rather than hunt might provide the healing Sarah needed. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah as she walked through the halls of Riverside Valley on her first official day. She had traded hunting predators for counseling their potential future victims, but the fundamental dynamics remained the same: the strong preying on the weak, psychological manipulation designed to maintain power, and the careful construction of facades to hide true intentions. Her office was located in the main administrative building, down a hallway lined with trophy cases and photographs of distinguished alumni. Room 204 was spacious and well lit, with large windows overlooking the student courtyard and enough room for both individual and group sessions. The previous occupant had left it spartanly furnished: a desk, 2 chairs, and a small bookshelf containing outdated psychology textbooks. Sarah had spent the weekend transforming the space, adding comfortable seating, plants that would thrive in the California sunshine, and carefully selected artwork that would help students feel at ease. She had also made some modifications that wouldn't be apparent to casual observers. The desk was positioned to give her a clear view of both the door and windows, eliminating blind spots where someone might approach undetected. A small mirror on the bookshelf provided additional visual coverage of the room's entrance. Her chair was height adjustable and on wheels, allowing for quick repositioning if needed. These weren't the paranoid preparations of someone who couldn't leave their past behind. They were the practical precautions of someone who understood that predators came in many forms. The first week passed quietly as Sarah familiarized herself with the school's rhythms and began building her caseload. She met with students struggling with anxiety and depression, helped mediate conflicts between friends, and provided guidance for those facing college application stress. The work was rewarding in ways that her FBI career had rarely been, offering the opportunity to prevent problems rather than simply respond to them after damage had been done. But she was also watching, using skills honed through years of behavioral analysis to map the school's social dynamics. She observed how certain Students moved through the hallways with confidence, while others hunched their shoulders and hurried past. She noted which teachers seemed comfortable and which appeared perpetually stressed. Most importantly, she began to understand the invisible web of fear that Jake Morrison and his companions had woven throughout the school. Their methods were sophisticated, showing a level of psychological awareness that impressed even Sarah's trained eye. They rarely engaged in obvious bullying that might attract administrative attention. Instead, they used subtlety and persistence, slowly breaking down their targets through a campaign of microaggressions, social isolation, and carefully orchestrated humiliation. Sarah first witnessed their work in action during lunch period on her second Friday. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She was eating in the faculty lounge when she heard commotion in the hallway outside. Through the window, she watched a thin sophomore named David Park stumbling as he tried to collect papers that had somehow scattered across the floor. Jake Morrison was nearby, ostensibly helping by picking up some of the fallen documents, his face a mask of concerned helpfulness. But Sarah's trained eye caught the details others missed. The way Jake's foot had accidentally kicked the papers as David bent to retrieve them. The satisfied smirk that flickered across Marcus Webb's face as he watched from across the hall. The strategic positioning that ensured maximum visibility for David's humiliation, while maintaining plausible deniability for their involvement. Most telling was David's reaction. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. His movements were practiced, efficient, designed to minimize the duration of his embarrassment. He kept his eyes down, avoided making contact with the growing crowd of observers, and murmured thanks to Jake with the kind of desperate gratitude that victims often showed their tormentors. Sarah made a mental note to schedule a session with David Park, but she also filed away her observations about Jake Morrison's techniques. In her experience, bullies who operated with this level of sophistication were among the most dangerous because they understood how to manipulate not just their victims but entire systems. They knew how to appear helpful while causing harm, how to maintain their reputations while destroying others, and how to exploit the natural human tendency to avoid confrontation. The following Monday brought Sarah's first direct encounter with the trio. She was reviewing case files in her office when her secretary, Mrs. Williams, knocked on the door with an expression of barely concealed anxiety. "Dr. Chen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are 3 students here who'd like to speak with you. They say it's about organizing a peer counseling program." Sarah looked up from her files, immediately noting the tension in Mrs. Williams' voice. In her peripheral vision, she could see 3 figures standing in the outer office, but their body language was wrong for students genuinely interested in peer counseling. They stood too close together, spoke in whispers, and one of them, the tallest, kept glancing toward her door with the kind of predatory assessment she'd seen in countless interrogation rooms. "Of course," Sarah replied with a warm smile that didn't reflect her heightened alertness. "Send them in." Jake Morrison entered first, his confident stride and easy smile designed to establish dominance through apparent friendliness. Marcus Webb followed, his bulk filling the doorway in a way that seemed almost deliberate. Tyler Kim brought up the rear, his dark eyes already scanning the office layout with the methodical attention of someone planning future visits. "Dr. Chen, thank you so much for seeing us," Jake began, settling into one of the chairs with the casual presumption of someone accustomed to being welcomed everywhere. "I'm Jake Morrison, and these are my friends Marcus and Tyler. We're really excited about having you here at Riverside Valley." Sarah maintained her pleasant expression while internally cataloging everything about the encounter. Jake's use of her title followed immediately by casual familiarity. The way he positioned himself in the most comfortable chair while his companions remained standing, establishing himself as the leader. The subtle emphasis on really excited that carried an undertone she couldn't quite identify yet. "It's nice to meet you all," Sarah replied, keeping her voice warm but professional. "Mrs. Williams mentioned you're interested in peer counseling. That's wonderful. Student-led mental health initiatives can be incredibly effective." "Exactly." Tyler spoke for the first time, his voice softer than his companions, but somehow more unsettling. "We've been thinking about how important it is for students to have someone they can relate to, someone who understands what they're going through." Marcus nodded along, though his attention seemed focused more on Sarah herself than on the conversation. "Yeah, sometimes the adult counselors, no offense, just don't get what it's like to be a teenager today. Social media, college pressure, all that stuff." Sarah leaned back slightly, a movement that appeared relaxed but actually gave her better positioning to observe all three students simultaneously. "That's a very mature perspective. Have you given thought to what kind of training peer counselors might need? There are liability issues to consider, confidentiality requirements, that sort of thing." The question was a test designed to gauge whether their interest was genuine or whether this visit served another purpose. Jake's response confirmed her suspicions. "Oh, we're not really worried about the technical stuff," he said with a dismissive wave. "We figure we'll start small, maybe just have informal conversations with kids who seem like they're struggling. Nothing official or complicated." In Sarah's experience, legitimate peer counseling advocates were always deeply concerned with training and ethical guidelines. Students who dismissed these concerns were typically more interested in access to vulnerable individuals than in providing genuine help. "I appreciate your enthusiasm," Sarah said carefully, "but any peer counseling program would need to meet district standards and include proper oversight. Perhaps we could schedule a longer meeting to discuss the requirements in detail." Tyler's eyes sharpened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, we understand there would be paperwork and stuff. We're just eager to get started helping people. Speaking of which, we heard about what happened to David Park last week. Poor kid seemed really upset about dropping all his papers." The casual mention of David Park sent a chill through Sarah's professional demeanor, though she maintained her composure perfectly. In her FBI days, this would have been called intelligence gathering, determining what the target knew and how they might react to future operations. "I'm sorry, I can't discuss specific students," Sarah replied with the kind of gentle firmness that established boundaries without creating confrontation. "But I'm glad to hear you're concerned about your classmates' well-being." Jake's smile widened, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Oh, absolutely. We really care about creating a positive environment here at Riverside Valley. Sometimes kids just need to know that people are watching out for them, you know." The phrasing was deliberately ambiguous, capable of innocent interpretation while carrying a subtle threat. Sarah recognized the technique from countless interviews with suspects who enjoyed demonstrating their cleverness while maintaining plausible deniability. That's exactly the kind of attitude that makes peer counseling programs successful, Sarah agreed, deciding to end the encounter before it could escalate further. "Why don't you each pick up information packets from Mrs. Williams, and we can schedule that follow-up meeting once you've had a chance to review the requirements?" The dismissal was polite but firm, and all three students recognized it. Jake stood with fluid grace, his smile never wavering but his eyes showing a flicker of something that might have been surprise. He was accustomed to controlling the length and direction of conversations, and Sarah's professional boundary setting had disrupted his expectations. "That sounds perfect," he said, extending his hand for a shake. "It's really great to finally have a counselor who seems to understand students. I think we're going to work together really well." Sarah shook his hand briefly, noting the slight increase in pressure that was meant to establish dominance, a technique she'd encountered from suspects trying to intimidate female agents. Her response was perfectly calibrated, firm enough to show she wouldn't be intimidated, brief enough to avoid turning the interaction into a contest of wills. "I look forward to seeing your commitment to helping your fellow students," she replied, a response that could be taken as encouragement. While subtly emphasizing the service aspect of peer counseling rather than the power dynamics Jake was likely most interested in. After they left, Sarah sat quietly in her office, processing the encounter with the analytical framework she'd developed over years of studying predatory behavior. The visit had been a reconnaissance mission, designed to assess her as both a potential obstacle and a possible target. Jake Morrison was clearly the leader, possessing the kind of charismatic manipulation skills that made him dangerous in social settings. Marcus Webb was the enforcer, someone who would handle direct confrontation if subtlety failed. Tyler Kim was the researcher and strategist, the one who would identify weaknesses and plan psychological attacks. What concerned Sarah most was their sophistication. These weren't typical teenage bullies acting out of insecurity or social awkwardness. They operated with the kind of calculated precision that suggested either natural talent for manipulation or extensive practice. In her experience, individuals who developed these skills during adolescence often became far more dangerous as adults. She made detailed notes about the encounter, documenting not just what was said, but the subtle behavioral cues that revealed the students' true intentions. In the bureau, she had learned that successful prosecution often depended on recognizing patterns early and building comprehensive documentation. While her current situation was different, the principles remained the same: observe, document, and prepare for escalation. The next few days brought a series of seemingly unrelated incidents that Sarah quickly recognized as a systematic campaign. Her computer password stopped working, requiring IT support to reset her access. The thermostat in her office malfunctioned, making the room uncomfortably warm during afternoon sessions. Her parking space was repeatedly occupied by vehicles without faculty permits, forcing her to park in remote areas of the lot. Each incident was minor and could be explained as coincidence or simple system failures. But Sarah's training had taught her to look for patterns that others might miss, and the timing was too perfect to be accidental. Someone was testing her reactions while simultaneously creating low-level stress designed to wear down her defenses. She responded exactly as her FBI experience had taught her: document everything, maintain normal routines, and show no signs of concern or frustration. Predators often escalated their behavior when they felt their initial tactics weren't having the desired effect, and Sarah wanted to understand the full scope of their capabilities before responding. Her restraint was tested on Thursday afternoon when she found her office door standing open, despite her certainty that she had locked it before leaving for lunch. Nothing appeared to be missing, but the arrangement of items on her desk had been subtly altered. Her computer was still password protected, but someone had clearly been in the room. Sarah conducted a careful inspection, using techniques learned during crime scene analysis to identify exactly what had been disturbed. The intrusion was professional in its subtlety, no obvious signs of forced entry. Nothing dramatically out of place, but clear evidence for anyone trained to notice that the space had been compromised. Most telling was what hadn't been touched. Her locked desk drawers remained secure, suggesting that the intruders either lacked the skills to defeat the locks or were more interested in sending a message than gathering information. The latter seemed more likely given their apparent sophistication in other areas. She also noticed something else: a small smudge on her computer monitor that suggested someone had attempted to guess her password. The angle and height of the mark indicated someone approximately 6 feet tall, consistent with Marcus Webb's physical profile. The carelessness of leaving evidence suggested either overconfidence or deliberate communication that they were capable of accessing her private space. Sarah made additional notes, but didn't immediately report the incident to administration. In her experience, predators often use their victims' reactions to gauge future tactics, and she wanted to understand their complete strategy before taking action that might cause them to adapt their approach. Her patience was rewarded Friday morning when Tyler Kim appeared at her office door during her planning period, ostensibly seeking advice about college applications, but clearly conducting another intelligence-gathering mission. "Dr. Chen, I hope I'm not bothering you," he began with the kind of polite deference that immediately put Sarah on guard. "I was wondering if you had time to talk about some college stuff. My parents are really putting pressure on me to get into Stanford, and I'm kind of stressed about it." Sarah gestured for him to sit, noting that he chose the same chair Jake had occupied earlier in the week. "Of course, Tyler. College application stress is very common, especially among high-achieving students. What specifically is causing you the most anxiety?" As Tyler began describing his supposed concerns about essays and recommendation letters, Sarah observed the tells that indicated deception. His body language was too controlled, his eye contact too deliberate, and his concerns too generic to reflect genuine anxiety. This was a performance, carefully crafted to appear vulnerable while actually probing for information. "It sounds like you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself," Sarah responded, playing along while watching for his real agenda to emerge. "Sometimes it helps to remember that there are many paths to success, and rejection from one school doesn't define your worth or potential." Tyler nodded earnestly, then shifted the conversation in a direction that revealed his true purpose. "That's really helpful advice. I was actually wondering, do you ever get stressed about your job? I mean, some of the other counselors seem to have a really hard time here. Mrs. Patterson always looked so tired, and Dr. Martinez seemed really angry toward the end." The question was designed to appear like innocent curiosity while actually assessing Sarah's knowledge of her predecessor's experiences and her potential vulnerability to similar pressures. In interrogation scenarios, Sarah had used similar techniques to determine whether suspects were aware of ongoing investigations. "Every job has its challenges," Sarah replied neutrally, "but I find working with students very rewarding." "Why do you ask? Did you have concerns about the counseling services here?" Tyler's smile was practiced and empty. "Oh no, not at all. I just noticed that counselors seem to have a hard time fitting in at Riverside Valley. Like the social dynamics here can be pretty intense, and sometimes new people struggle to understand how things work." The phrasing was carefully chosen to sound like helpful information while actually communicating a threat. Tyler was essentially telling Sarah that her predecessors had failed to understand the school's power structure and had suffered consequences. As a result, "I appreciate you sharing your observations," Sarah said, maintaining her professional tone while mentally noting the implicit warning. "What would you say is the most important thing for new staff members to understand about Riverside Valley's culture?" The question turned Tyler's intelligence-gathering attempt back on him, forcing him to reveal more about how he and his friends viewed their position in the school hierarchy. His response was illuminating. "I think the most important thing is recognizing that some students have been here longer and understand the unwritten rules better than others. Like, there are certain kids who've earned respect through their contributions to the school, and new people sometimes don't realize that. When they try to change things too quickly or challenge the way things have always been done, it can create problems for everyone." Sarah recognized the language of institutional power, the kind of reasoning used by individuals who had established control and viewed any challenge to their authority as a threat to stability. In law enforcement, she had encountered similar attitudes from corrupt officials who justified their behavior as necessary for maintaining order. "That's an interesting perspective," Sarah replied. "How do you think new staff members should go about learning these unwritten rules?" Tyler's eyes showed a flash of something predatory before he caught himself. "Oh, I think they just need to be open to guidance from students who want to help them succeed. Like, if someone takes the time to explain how things work, it's probably because they want to prevent problems, not create them." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Tyler maintaining his facade of seeking college counseling while actually conducting what amounted to a psychological assessment. By the time he left, Sarah had a clear understanding of the implicit bargain being offered: accept the existing power structure and receive protection, or challenge it and face the consequences that had driven away her predecessors. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment reviewing her notes and considering her options. In the FBI, she would have had resources, backup, and legal authority to address threats and gather evidence. As a school counselor, she was largely on her own, bound by professional ethics and limited by institutional constraints that often protected students like Jake Morrison more effectively than they protected their victims. But she also had advantages that her predecessors had lacked. Her psychological training allowed her to understand predatory behavior in ways that most educators couldn't. Her experience with manipulation and intimidation had prepared her for exactly the kind of sophisticated campaign being waged against her. Most importantly, her years of hunting dangerous individuals had taught her patience, strategy, and the importance of gathering complete intelligence before taking action. Sarah made her decision with the same methodical approach she had once used to build cases against serial killers. She would not be driven away like her predecessors, but neither would she engage in a direct confrontation that might escalate the situation beyond her ability to control. Instead, she would use the very skills that had made her effective against criminals to protect the students of Riverside Valley and demonstrate that some targets were more dangerous to predators than they appeared. The game was just beginning. And while Jake Morrison and his friends had experience intimidating educators, they had never faced someone who had spent years studying predators far more dangerous than themselves. They were about to learn that their new counselor was not just another victim waiting to be broken, but a hunter who had found new prey. As Sarah prepared for what she knew would be an escalating conflict, she reflected on the irony of her situation. She had left the FBI to escape the darkness of human nature, only to find herself confronting a different kind of evil in the seemingly safe environment of an elite high school. But perhaps this was exactly where her skills were needed most, not hunting killers who operated in shadows, but stopping the creation of future predators who learned their techniques in the bright hallways of American schools. The real work was about to begin. The following Monday marked the beginning of what Sarah privately termed active engagement. She arrived at school 30 minutes earlier than usual, using the quiet time to implement security measures that would have been routine in a federal investigation, but were innovative in a high school setting. She installed a discreet motion-activated camera in her office, positioning it to capture anyone who might attempt another unauthorized visit. The device was commercially available and perfectly legal for monitoring her own workspace, though she doubted the administration would appreciate the implications. Sarah also began what she called behavioral mapping, systematically documenting the patterns of movement and interaction throughout the school. She noted which students avoided certain hallways, who ate lunch alone despite appearing socially capable, and which teachers showed signs of chronic stress that couldn't be explained by normal educational pressures. The picture that emerged was disturbing in its scope and sophistication. Jake Morrison and his companions had created what amounted to a protection racket within the school's social ecosystem. Students who aligned themselves with the trio enjoyed immunity from harassment and often participated in targeting those who didn't. Teachers who overlooked their behavior were left alone, while those who attempted to enforce standards found themselves facing a campaign of subtle but persistent psychological warfare that was nearly impossible to prove or prosecute. The system was brilliant in its simplicity and horrifying in its effectiveness. By maintaining plausible deniability while creating genuine consequences for resistance, they had essentially institutionalized their power in ways that would have impressed organized crime figures Sarah had once investigated. Her analysis was interrupted Tuesday morning by Mrs. Williams' urgent knock on her office door. The secretary's face was pale with concern as she gestured toward the outer office where a small cluster of people had gathered. Dr. Chen, there's been an incident. Amanda Foster is here with her parents, and they're requesting an immediate meeting. She's pretty upset. Sarah knew Amanda by reputation, a junior who served as editor of the school newspaper and had previously maintained an impeccable academic record. She was exactly the kind of high-achieving student who might attract negative attention from those who enjoyed destroying others' accomplishments. The family that entered Sarah's office told a story that had become tragically familiar. Amanda sat between her parents, her usually confident demeanor replaced by the hollow-eyed exhaustion that Sarah recognized from trauma victims. Mr. and Mrs. Foster flanked their daughter protectively, their expressions cycling between fury and helplessness. Dr. Chen, thank you for seeing us on such short notice, Mrs. Foster began, her voice tight with controlled emotion. We need to discuss what's been happening to Amanda over the past 2 weeks. Amanda's story unfolded with the methodical precision that Sarah had come to associate with her predecessor's tormentors. It had started with seemingly innocent interactions, Jake Morrison approaching her after journalism class to compliment an article she'd written, Marcus Webb offering to help carry equipment for the photography club, Tyler Kim engaging her in discussions about college preparation that seemed genuinely supportive. The transition from friendly attention to psychological manipulation had been so gradual that Amanda hadn't recognized it until the damage was already significant. Compliments became backhanded criticisms about her writing style. Helpful suggestions transformed into pointed observations about her social awkwardness. Friendly conversations evolved into probing questions about her insecurities and family problems. They know everything about me now, Amanda whispered, her voice barely audible. Things I told them when I thought they were being nice, and they're using it all against me. The campaign had escalated when Amanda published an editorial questioning the school's disciplinary policies regarding athlete privileges. Within hours, her personal information had been leaked across social media platforms. Private photographs from her middle school years surfaced on anonymous accounts with cruel captions. Her writing was dissected and mocked in ways that demonstrated intimate knowledge of her vulnerabilities. Most devastatingly, a fabricated audio recording had been circulated claiming to capture Amanda making disparaging comments about scholarship students and their families. The recording was sophisticated enough to fool casual listeners while containing subtle tells that indicated digital manipulation to Sarah's trained ear. The worst part is that people believe it, Amanda continued, tears streaming down her face. My friends won't talk to me. Teachers look at me differently. Even some of the scholarship students I've tried to help through my articles think I betrayed them. Mr. Foster leaned forward, his jaw clenched with barely contained rage. We've been to the administration 3 times. They say they're investigating, but nothing happens. Meanwhile, our daughter is being destroyed by these kids, and they act like it's all just teenage drama. Sarah listened with the focused attention she had once reserved for witness testimonies in federal cases. Every detail Amanda shared confirmed her analysis of the trio's methods while revealing new levels of sophistication that genuinely surprised her. The psychological profiling, the strategic information gathering, the coordinated social media campaign. These weren't the actions of typical high school bullies, but of individuals who understood psychological warfare at an advanced level. Amanda, I want you to know that what you're experiencing is not normal teenage conflict, Sarah said carefully, choosing her words to validate the trauma while avoiding language that might compromise future actions. What you're describing shows planning, coordination, and specific intent to cause psychological harm. That's not acceptable under any circumstances. She paused, studying Amanda's reaction before continuing. I also want you to know that the audio recording you mentioned has characteristics that suggest digital manipulation. There are ways to prove that, but it would require specialized analysis. Hope flickered in Amanda's eyes for the first time since entering the office. "You believe me? You don't think I'm just being oversensitive?" "I believe you completely," Sarah replied with the conviction that came from recognizing patterns she'd seen countless times before. "What's happening to you follows a specific methodology that indicates advanced planning and psychological sophistication. This isn't random meanness, it's systematic psychological abuse." The meeting continued for another hour as Sarah gathered detailed information about the timeline, methods, and scope of the harassment campaign. She also provided Amanda and her parents with practical strategies for documentation and self-protection while explaining the limitations of traditional disciplinary approaches when dealing with sophisticated psychological manipulation. After the foster family left, Sarah sat alone in her office, processing the implications of what she'd learned. The trio's campaign against Amanda demonstrated several concerning escalations from their previous patterns. They had moved beyond simple intimidation to active destruction of reputation and social standing. They had incorporated technology in ways that showed genuine technical skill. Most disturbing, they had demonstrated the ability to manipulate not just their direct victims, but entire social networks. Sarah recognized the escalation for what it was, a response to her presence and her failure to be intimidated by their initial probes. By maintaining her position and refusing to show fear, she had forced them to demonstrate more of their capabilities than they typically revealed. In doing so, they had also provided her with the evidence she needed to understand the full scope of their operations. That afternoon brought confirmation that her analysis was correct. Tyler Kim appeared at her office door during lunch period, his expression showing more confidence than his previous visit. "Dr. Chen, I hope you have a few minutes," he began, settling into his preferred chair without waiting for invitation. "I wanted to follow up on our conversation about college stress and maybe discuss some concerns about the school climate." Sarah noted the shift in his approach immediately. Where his previous visit had been tentative and probing, this interaction carried an undertone of implied authority. He was no longer gathering intelligence but delivering a message. "Of course, Tyler. What specific concerns did you want to discuss?" Tyler's smile was practiced and cold. "Well, I've been hearing some troubling things about Amanda Foster. Some students are saying she's been spreading rumors about the counseling staff, claiming that you've been making inappropriate comments about other students and their families." The accusation was delivered with the casual tone of someone sharing gossip, but Sarah recognized it as the opening move in a more direct campaign. They were attempting to preemptively undermine her credibility while simultaneously testing her reaction to false allegations. "That's concerning if true," Sarah replied evenly, her expression showing mild interest rather than alarm. "Could you be more specific about what's being said? I'd like to address any misunderstandings." Tyler's eyes showed a flicker of surprise at her calm response. "I don't want to repeat the specific claims, they're pretty serious. But some people are saying you've been sharing confidential information about students and making judgmental comments about their backgrounds. There's talk about filing complaints with the district." Sarah maintained her professional demeanor while internally cataloging every aspect of the threat. The accusations were crafted to exploit her position's vulnerabilities, confidentiality, violations, and discriminatory behavior were among the few allegations that could destroy a counselor's career regardless of evidence. The mention of district complaints indicated they understood administrative pressure points and were prepared to escalate beyond the school level. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention," Sarah said, her tone suggesting genuine gratitude. "False allegations can be very damaging, so I'm glad to know what's being said. Have you heard these concerns directly from Amanda, or are they coming through other sources?" The question was designed to force Tyler to either implicate himself directly or reveal the chain of communication they were using to spread the rumors. His response confirmed her suspicions about their organizational structure. Oh, I haven't talked to Amanda directly about this. It's more like general conversation among students who are concerned about the counseling program. You know how these things spread. Someone hears something, tells someone else, and pretty soon everyone's talking about it. Sarah nodded understandingly, while noting Tyler's careful avoidance of direct responsibility. That's exactly how misunderstandings can grow into serious problems. I think the best approach would be for me to speak directly with Amanda about these concerns. If there's been a miscommunication, we can clear it up quickly. Tyler's composure slipped slightly, revealing genuine alarm at the prospect of direct communication between Sarah and her victim. I'm not sure that's necessary. I mean, Amanda's already pretty upset about other things, and bringing this up might just make everything worse for her. The concern was transparently false, designed to prevent Sarah from disrupting their narrative. Control. In her FBI experience, suspects often tried to isolate their victims from potential allies using similar tactics of false protection. I understand your concern for Amanda's well-being, Sarah replied, but as a counselor, I have an ethical obligation to address any allegations about my professional conduct. I'm sure Amanda would want the opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings. Tyler stood abruptly, his mask of helpful concern dropping entirely. Look, Dr. Chen, I'm trying to give you friendly advice here. Sometimes when new people come into an established community, they don't understand how things work. Maybe it would be better to just acknowledge that mistakes were made and commit to being more careful in the future. The shift to direct intimidation marked a significant escalation, one that Sarah had been expecting since her first encounter with the trio. Tyler was essentially offering her the same deal her predecessors had apparently rejected: admit wrongdoing for things she hadn't done, in exchange for reduced pressure. Sarah stood as well, her posture remaining relaxed but her voice carrying a new edge of authority. Tyler, I want to be very clear about something. I haven't made any inappropriate comments about students or their families. I haven't violated any confidentiality agreements, and I haven't done anything that requires apology or correction. If there are specific allegations being made, I expect them to be reported through proper channels where they can be investigated appropriately. Tyler's face showed genuine surprise at her direct rejection of his implied offer. You might want to reconsider that position, Dr. Chen. Sometimes these situations can get a lot worse before they get better. The threat was explicit enough to constitute intimidation, while remaining vague enough to maintain plausible deniability if reported. Sarah recognized the technique from countless interrogations where suspects had tried to communicate menace without creating actionable evidence. I appreciate your concern, Sarah replied, her tone suggesting the conversation was ending, but I'm confident that proper investigation will resolve any legitimate concerns. Is there anything else about your college preparation that you wanted to discuss? The dismissal was professional but firm, and Tyler recognized that his intimidation attempt had failed entirely. He left without another word, but his expression promised that more direct measures would follow. Sarah spent the remainder of the afternoon documenting the encounter and analyzing the implications of Tyler's escalation. The false allegations about Amanda were clearly preparation for a broader campaign designed to destroy her professional reputation before she could effectively challenge their power structure. The timeline suggested they were accelerating their usual methods, possibly in response to her failure to respond to earlier intimidation attempts. Her assessment proved accurate when Principal Henderson requested a meeting the following morning. Dr. Henderson was a well-meaning administrator who had inherited many of the school's cultural problems and lacked the investigative background necessary to recognize sophisticated manipulation. He appeared genuinely troubled as he gestured for Sarah to sit across from his desk. Sarah, I've received some concerning reports that I need to discuss with you. Several students have come forward with allegations about inappropriate conduct during counseling sessions. I want to hear your side before we proceed with any formal investigation. Sarah maintained her calm professional demeanor while internally cataloging every detail of the accusation. Could you be more specific about the nature of these allegations, Dr. Henderson? I want to address any concerns thoroughly. Henderson consulted a folder on his desk, his expression suggesting genuine reluctance to proceed. The allegations center on claims that you've been sharing confidential information about students with other students, making disparaging comments about certain families' economic status, and creating a hostile environment for students who don't conform to your expectations. Each accusation was carefully crafted to exploit administrative fears about legal liability while being sufficiently vague to make direct refutation difficult. Sarah recognized the sophistication immediately. These weren't typical teenage complaints but strategically designed allegations that demonstrated understanding of educational law and administrative pressure points. Those are serious accusations, Sarah replied, and I want to address them directly. I have never shared confidential student information with anyone outside the appropriate professional channels. I have never made disparaging comments about any family's economic status. And I have worked consistently to create an inclusive, supportive environment for all students. Henderson nodded, appearing relieved by her direct denial. I was hoping you'd say that. The allegations seemed out of character based on your initial performance here. But I'm sure you understand that we have to take any concerns seriously, especially when they involve potential confidentiality violations. Sarah leaned forward slightly, recognizing an opportunity to shift the conversation toward her own observations. Absolutely, and I appreciate your thoroughness in investigating these claims. In that spirit, I think you should know that I've observed some concerning patterns of behavior that might be relevant to understanding the context of these allegations. Henderson's expression sharpened with interest. What kind of patterns? Sarah chose her words carefully, balancing her need to communicate important information with the constraints of her professional position. I've documented instances of sophisticated psychological manipulation targeting vulnerable students, including coordinated social media campaigns, strategic information gathering, and systematic isolation tactics. The methodology suggests advanced planning and understanding of psychological pressure points. Henderson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Are you talking about bullying? Because we have policies in place to address those situations. This goes beyond typical bullying, Sarah replied. What I'm observing shows characteristics of organized psychological warfare, including attempts to manipulate administrative responses and undermine staff authority. The timing of the allegations against me, combined with documented harassment of other students, suggests a coordinated effort to neutralize potential threats to an established power structure. The administrator's expressions cycled through confusion, concern, and what might have been recognition. Are you suggesting that the allegations against you are part of some kind of organized campaign? Sarah maintained her professional tone while allowing her certainty to show through. I'm suggesting that the sophistication of recent psychological attacks on students, combined with the strategic nature of allegations against staff who might challenge those attacks, indicates coordination and planning beyond typical adolescent behavior. Henderson was quiet for several moments, apparently processing the implications of Sarah's analysis. These are serious allegations on both sides. What kind of evidence are we talking about? Sarah had prepared for this question and had her response ready. I've documented patterns of behavior, timing of incidents, and methodologies that show consistency across multiple targets. I also have evidence of digital manipulation, including fabricated audio recordings and coordinated social media campaigns. With proper investigation, I believe we could establish clear patterns of systematic psychological abuse. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes as Sarah carefully laid out her observations without revealing the full extent of her investigative background. She provided enough information to demonstrate the seriousness of the situation while positioning herself as a concerned professional rather than someone conducting her own investigation. Henderson agreed to postpone any formal action on the allegations against Sarah pending a broader investigation of the harassment patterns she had described. More importantly, he authorized her to work with the school's technology department to analyze digital evidence and coordinate with district security officials if necessary. That afternoon brought vindication sooner than Sarah had expected. Amanda Foster returned to her office with evidence that Tyler Kim had apparently not anticipated. She carried a laptop and wore an expression of grim satisfaction that suggested recent developments had shifted the balance of power. "Dr. Chen, I think you need to see this," Amanda began, opening her laptop to display a series of screenshots. "I've been documenting everything since our meeting yesterday, and I caught them making a mistake." The screenshots showed a group chat that Amanda had apparently been added to accidentally, possibly due to a technical error in the social media platform. The conversation included Jake Morrison, Marcus Webb, and Tyler Kim discussing their campaign against both Amanda and Sarah with a level of detail that was both incriminating and revealing. "Look at this message from Tyler," Amanda pointed to specific text on the screen. "He's talking about how they need to neutralize the counselor before she figures out the full scope of their operations. And here's Jake discussing the fake audio recording and how they created it using voice synthesis software." Sarah studied the evidence with growing amazement at the trio's operational security failure. Professional criminals rarely documented their activities so thoroughly, but adolescent overconfidence had apparently led them to communicate in ways that created permanent evidence of their planning and coordination. The messages revealed details that confirmed Sarah's analysis while providing new insights into their methods. They discussed previous counselors by name, detailing specific tactics used to drive them away. They referenced other students they had dealt with using similar psychological manipulation techniques. Most damaging, they explicitly discussed their current campaign against Sarah, including the fabricated allegations and their plans for escalation if she didn't resign. "Amanda, this is extremely valuable evidence," Sarah said carefully. "But I need to make sure we handle it properly to ensure it can be used effectively. How did you gain access to this conversation?" Amanda's expression showed both pride and lingering fear. "Tyler added me to their private group chat by accident when he was trying to add someone else with a similar username. I realized what it was and started taking screenshots before they noticed and removed me. The whole conversation was only visible for about 10 minutes, but I managed to capture most of it." Sarah recognized the intelligence value of the intercepted communications, while also understanding the legal and ethical complexities of the evidence obtained in this manner. However, the content was so clearly incriminating that it would likely overcome any procedural concerns, especially given the systematic nature of the harassment it documented. "This information could be crucial for protecting both you and other students," Sarah told Amanda. "Are you willing to share this with the administration as part of an official investigation?" Amanda nodded with newfound determination. "I want everyone to know what they've been doing. Not just to me, but to all the other kids they've hurt over the years." The afternoon meeting with Principal Henderson took on an entirely different character when Sarah and Amanda presented the intercepted communications. Henderson's expression shifted from skeptical concern to horrified realization as he read through the messages documenting years of systematic psychological abuse and administrative manipulation. "This is beyond anything I've seen in 20 years of education," Henderson said quietly, his voice showing genuine shock. "These aren't just bullying incidents. This describes organized psychological warfare against students and staff." Sarah nodded gravely. "The communications confirm what I've been observing through behavioral analysis. These individuals have created a systematic approach to maintaining power through intimidation, manipulation, and strategic information warfare. They've essentially institutionalized psychological abuse within the school's social structure. Henderson's response was immediate and comprehensive. He authorized Sarah to work directly with district security and law enforcement to analyze the digital evidence. He suspended Jake Morrison, Marcus Webb, and Tyler Kim, pending a full investigation. Most importantly, he initiated a broader review of the school's culture and policies to address the systematic issues that had allowed such behavior to flourish. The next few days brought rapid developments as the investigation expanded beyond the immediate trio to encompass their broader network of enablers and victims. Sarah found herself working directly with detective specialists and digital forensics experts, using skills from her FBI background while maintaining her cover as a concerned counselor who had stumbled upon the evidence. The voice synthesis software used to create the fabricated audio recording of Amanda was traced to an advanced program that required significant technical knowledge to operate effectively. Digital forensics revealed that similar synthetic audio files had been created targeting other students over the past 2 years, suggesting a systematic campaign of character assassination that went far beyond typical adolescent cruelty. Social media analysis uncovered a network of fake accounts used to amplify harassment campaigns and spread manipulated content. The sophistication of the operation impressed even the law enforcement specialists, who noted that the psychological manipulation techniques being employed were typically associated with adult criminal organizations rather than high school students. Most significantly, the investigation revealed evidence of potential criminal activity, including identity theft, digital harassment, and conspiracy to commit psychological abuse. What had begun as a school disciplinary matter was rapidly evolving into a criminal investigation with potential federal implications due to the interstate nature of some of the digital communications. Sarah watched the developments with professional satisfaction tempered by genuine concern for the scope of damage that had been inflicted over the years. The systematic nature of the psychological abuse had created trauma in dozens of students, while institutionalizing a culture of fear that had corrupted the entire educational environment. The real test came when the trio's parents arrived at the school, demanding explanations and threatening legal action. Richard Morrison, Marcus Webb Sr., and Judge Patricia Kim represented the kind of institutional power that had previously protected their children from consequences. They arrived with attorneys and attitudes that suggested confidence in their ability to contain the situation. Sarah observed the meeting from Principal Henderson's conference room, noting the dynamics as the parents attempted to minimize their children's behavior, while threatening the school with lawsuits for what they characterized as overreaction to normal teenage conflicts. "These are children," Richard Morrison declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to intimidating subordinates. "Whatever pranks they may have engaged in, criminalizing adolescent behavior sets a dangerous precedent that will hurt the entire community." Judge Kim's approach was more sophisticated, focusing on procedural concerns and potential legal vulnerabilities in the school's investigation. The evidence collection methods used here raised serious questions about privacy rights and due process. "My understanding is that private communications were obtained without proper authorization and are being used to justify extreme disciplinary measures." Sarah recognized the defense strategies from her FBI experience: minimize the behavior, attack the evidence, and use institutional pressure to force favorable outcomes. The parents were essentially employing the same tactics their children had used, confirming her analysis that the psychological manipulation skills had been learned rather than developed independently. Principal Henderson's response demonstrated growth and understanding that impressed Sarah. Rather than yielding to pressure, he calmly outlined the scope of evidence while emphasizing the school's obligation to protect all students from systematic psychological abuse. "We're not talking about pranks or normal teenage behavior," Henderson replied firmly. The evidence shows coordinated psychological warfare designed to cause maximum emotional damage to vulnerable students. The methods employed demonstrate planning, sophistication, and understanding of psychological manipulation that goes far beyond anything that could be characterized as typical adolescent conflict. The meeting continued for 2 hours as attorneys argued procedural points while parents denied the severity of their children's actions. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the involvement of law enforcement had moved the situation beyond the realm of administrative discretion into criminal investigation territory. Sarah's role in the proceedings remained carefully concealed, with her contributions attributed to advanced training in behavioral analysis rather than her FBI background. She provided psychological profiles and behavioral assessments that helped investigators understand the systematic nature of the abuse, while maintaining her cover as a counselor who had simply recognized patterns others had missed. The criminal investigation expanded rapidly as digital forensics uncovered evidence of similar operations targeting students at other schools in the district. The trio had apparently been refining their techniques over several years, creating a methodology that could be adapted to different environments and victim populations. Federal involvement became inevitable when investigators discovered that some of the synthetic media creation and distribution had crossed state lines, potentially violating federal laws regarding interstate harassment and digital manipulation. The case was attracting attention from cybercrime specialists who were interested in the sophisticated techniques being employed by juveniles. Sarah found herself consulting with federal agents she had once worked alongside, though her current role required maintaining professional distance from investigations she might have once led personally. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had left federal law enforcement only to find herself confronting criminal behavior that required federal resources to properly address. The impact on Riverside Valley High School was immediate and transformative. Students who had lived in fear for years began coming forward with their own stories of psychological abuse and manipulation. Teachers who had been afraid to enforce standards found renewed confidence as the culture of intimidation dissolved. The administration implemented new policies and training programs designed to prevent the emergence of similar power structures. In the future, Amanda Foster emerged as an unexpected leader in the healing process, using her journalism skills to document the experiences of other victims while advocating for systemic changes that would prevent future abuse. Her transformation from victim to advocate provided a model for other students who were struggling to process their own experiences with systematic psychological manipulation. The trio's attempts to maintain their innocence crumbled as additional evidence emerged, and their network of enablers distanced themselves from the criminal investigation. Jake Morrison's confident facade gave way to genuine fear as he realized the potential consequences of behavior he had considered untouchable. Due to his family's wealth and influence, Marcus Webb's aggressive intimidation tactics proved counterproductive in legal settings where his size and demeanor worked against him rather than providing advantage. Tyler Kim's strategic intelligence became a liability as investigators recognized the sophisticated planning that elevated charges from simple harassment to organized conspiracy. Sarah watched the legal proceedings with professional interest, while maintaining her role as a counselor, helping the school community heal from years of systematic trauma. Her unique background allowed her to provide insights that helped both victims and administrators understand the sophisticated nature of the psychological abuse they had endured. The case attracted national attention as experts recognized the implications of sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques being employed by high school students. Educational conferences began featuring presentations about recognizing and preventing the kind of systematic abuse that had flourished at Riverside Valley for years. Sarah found herself reluctantly becoming an expert resource for other schools and districts dealing with similar situations. Her combination of psychological training and practical Experience with sophisticated manipulation made her uniquely qualified to help educators recognize warning signs and implement preventive measures. The federal investigation continued expanding as connections were discovered between the Riverside Valley operation and similar activities at elite schools in other states. What had initially appeared to be an isolated incident of teenage bullying had revealed itself as part of a broader pattern of sophisticated psychological abuse being perpetrated by privileged adolescents who believed their family status provided immunity from consequences. Sarah's greatest satisfaction came from watching the transformation of students who had been victimized by the systematic abuse. As the culture of fear dissolved, academic performance improved, social interactions became healthier, and the genuine potential of the student body began to emerge. The school that had once been characterized by systematic intimidation was evolving into an environment where learning and growth could flourish. The legal consequences for Jake Morrison, Marcus Webb, and Tyler Kim were severe enough to send a clear message about the unacceptability of systematic psychological abuse, while providing a framework for addressing similar cases in other jurisdictions. Their conviction on federal charges related to digital harassment and conspiracy marked a precedent that would influence how such cases were prosecuted nationwide. Sarah's role in exposing and stopping the systematic abuse remained largely hidden from public view, but her impact on the Riverside Valley community was immeasurable. Students who might have been driven to despair or self-harm by continued psychological torture were instead empowered to heal and grow. Teachers who had been demoralized by years of institutional intimidation rediscovered their passion for education. An entire school community had been liberated from a reign of terror that had corrupted every aspect of the educational environment. As the immediate crisis resolved and normal operations resumed at Riverside Valley, Sarah reflected on the unexpected direction her career transition had taken. She had sought to escape the darkness of human nature only to discover that her skills were desperately needed in environments that appeared safe but harbored sophisticated predators. The revelation that elite educational institutions could nurture the development of criminal manipulation techniques had implications that extended far beyond any single school or district. The work was far from finished, but the immediate threat had been neutralized, and the foundation had been laid for systemic changes that would prevent similar abuse from taking root in the future. Sarah had proven that predators could be stopped regardless of their institutional protection or sophisticated techniques, and that sometimes the most effective countermeasures came from unexpected sources. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.